Ujaali, Book 2 in Laura Enright's Chicago Vampire series. Prologue. She seemed to be resting comfortably. The diminutive Indian woman, having experienced many decades of life, now lay quietly in the bed of her room in the assistant living complex into which she had been moved the previous year. A nasal cannula provided oxygen to lungs overtaxed by age, and the machine made a slight hissing sound as it provided its relief. Was this the sound that had replaced that sweet tinkle of a laugh from so long ago? Narain blinked at the moisture forming in his eyes, looking down at the old woman lying so still in the bed. He mouthed her name. Ujaali. The little girl he had lifted so easily. The little girl he had left behind. She had grown, married, raised a family, spoiled her grandchildren, and rejoiced in the birth of 2 great-grandchildren before her vibrancy began to dim. She was 97, and time was very quickly running out. It had taken 2.5 years to track her down using a variety of methods, including detectives on 2 continents. Narain hadn't even been sure what he would say to her if he found her, or, for that matter, why he initiated the search. He just couldn't shake the pressing need to find her. He needed to know if she still lived, and if so, if she had had a good life. He had been relieved to find out that the answer to both questions was yes. He discovered that she had married a truly loving man who predeceased her for a few years before. They had moved to the States not long after the wedding, where he was a respected engineer and teacher, and they produced 6 wonderful children who had placed her in one of the best senior care centers once her time was nearing its end. Her life had been rich with joy, and that's all Narain ever wanted for her. Then why was he standing before her bed, fighting the urge to disturb her slumber, desperate to hear her call his name? It would not be the voice Narain remembered, the voice of the little sister he left behind. Ujaali was a woman now. She had grieved for her brother and moved on, living a life that would have flavored her voice. He knew why he was there. The experience with Jameson and Blythe months before had shaken Narain more than he cared to admit. It had opened up wounds that he thought he had dealt with decades before. She was the last link to the family that he had been ripped away from, and with her so close to death, his resurrection would no longer have an impact on her life. When he had discovered she was still alive, he wanted to see her desperately. Yet now, standing by her bedside, he felt like an intruder. To her he had died very long ago. What right had this ghost to disturb this myth at the end of her life? Before he could convince himself to leave, however, Ujaali's eyes opened and her gaze drifted slowly up to him, a smile chasing the slumber from her face. "Narain?" she softly exclaimed, and he needed no other urging. Quickly he sat next to her, grasping the hand she reached out to him. She displayed no shock, no fear, simply pure joy as tears glistened in her eyes. Still, her soft voice was slightly chiding as she pointed out, "You never returned. You told me you would, but you didn't." Narain found himself speechless, lowering his head and squeezing back tears. He felt her still, soft hand reach out and brush back his hair as she gently asked, "Why didn't you come back?" A sob caught in his throat as visions of his sister clinging to his neck on the day he left India gripped him. At last he found his voice. "I wasn't able to," he told her, raising his gaze to hers and trying to regain his composure. She was on the threshold of death, seeing the young brother who went off and died in a foreign land, yet accepting his presence next to her without question. Swallowing, he said, "I had something else I had to do. I couldn't return." "Cooking?" she asked, innocently enthusiastic, sounding very much like the 5-year-old he left. "Did you become a famous chef?" He smiled, offering only, "I did all right for myself. But I thought of you so often." Ujaali rubbed his hand, hers cold yet curiously soft. "You haven't changed." She shifted slightly, and he pressed the button to raise the head of the bed up. "So many years, and you're still my handsome brother. Just like Aziz." His brows furrowed. "Aziz?" "He visits also. He tells me I'll be seeing our family again soon." I will see them all very soon. Narain nodded, understanding the dream that brought Aziz to her. Or perhaps their dead brother had come to her in a vision to prepare her for death. He told me I would see Rohit as well. She motioned to a family portrait on the table next to her bed. Pointing to the handsome man posed next to her in the picture, she said, My husband Rohit, your brother-in-law, and my children, your nieces and nephews. I told them so very much about their brave Uncle Narain. A slight coughing spasm caught her, and he waited patiently for her to finish. My brother who won the war. Ujaali chuckled, though emotion made Narain's throat tighten as he stared down at the photograph he held, studying the smiling faces of the family. His family. Nieces and nephews who would never know their Uncle Narain. They are lovely children, he said finally. And they are good to you? She clucked her tongue. Oh, good does not describe the love they've shown me. I'm so proud of them. I will miss them so. A thoughtful silence fell over her before she admitted, Still, it will be good to see the family again. Oh, and my darling Rohit. How I've missed him these past years. Narain smiled in understanding, but then looked away, the smile fading. Reaching up, she took his chin, turning his face toward her again. Staring into his eyes, she sensed the sadness hiding just beyond them. Pursing her lips, she asked, You don't belong here, do you? Narain was trying to be strong, yet failing miserably as tears spilled on his cheeks. A veil had lifted slightly during the conversation, offering her a clarity that she might not be able to retain long in her current physical need. She saw him for the anomaly that he was, her brother 20 years her senior, looking 70 years younger than she. Still, there was no fear or concern, just a gratefulness at the reunion mixed with regret that it would be so brief. Quietly, she said, When I go to meet our family again, you won't be there, will you? He sighed, shaking his head. No, I must stay here. The guilt in his voice touched his sister deeply, and she rubbed his cheek. That's okay, Bai. You'll return. Soon it'll be my turn to leave, but we'll meet again. Her eyelids grew heavy as sleep crept up on her. Just be happy. I will, my dear little sister. Narain allowed her to slip away from him into the sleep her body craved. He didn't know when her last breath would be taken, but it would be soon. He could sense it in the great effort her age-weakened heart was putting into the beating. He could hear it in the wheeze of her shallow inhalation. He could feel it in the coolness of her skin. But the body had its own time, and would cease when it was ready. He had learned that with Sophie, which was why every moment he had spent with her was a gift from the heavens and more precious than gold. Ujaali may have days or weeks, perhaps months. This, however, would be their last meeting. It was difficult enough sneaking into the hospital at so late an hour. Even if he could withstand the daylight hours, he could never explain his presence to those who had been told he had died in battle so long ago. Allowing himself a few more moments to gaze upon her, Narain finally sighed, leaned forward and kissed Ujaali softly on the forehead, softly humming a verse from the children's song they had sung together so often when she was a child. When he closed his eyes, he was certain that he could see the path back home and hear the sweet laugh of a 5-year-old girl coming to meet him. Then he forced himself from her side and walked out of the room, never once turning back. He had become quite good at not turning back. Ujaali? Ujaali's eyes drifted open again, and she coughed from a bit of the congestion that had settled in her chest. She had been having such a wonderful dream about Narain. How she had missed him all these years. How she missed her family. How she had wished it hadn't been a dream. Ujaali, wake up. She looked up and smiles spread across her lips. Bai? She whispered, reaching out to the figure sitting on her bed. Her eyes were cloudy from sleep, but she knew he was there. My brother, you came back. I've missed you so. I'm here, Ujaali, to help you. Then we can be together again. She nodded. Yes, her Bai would help her pass. He would take her to see her family again. The last few months had been so tiring. She just wanted to rest. Nodding again and smiling, she reached out to him, and he enveloped her in his arms. Her big brother, protecting her. He was so strong and handsome, with a scent of cinnamon that warmed her entire being and distracted her from the feeling the set of fangs that punctured her neck.